Hello everyone and welcome back. Becoming a good top lane isn't that easy as you might think. You might have heard from the top laners that the top lane is not an impactful role at all, but honestly, if you're a decent top laner, you can basically solo carry the game. In this guide, you'll see how to be a decent top laner. So first of all, let's talk about the lane itself. The lane is pretty long, so it means that you are vulnerable to ganks and you need to play smart. You can easily avoid early ganks by looking at the map. And whether the top or bot is late on the lane, you're gonna know where the enemy jungler started. Every time you push, you need to have an idea where the enemy jungler is. We're gonna show you the most common top wards you can place. These are the most common ones, Ward 1 and Ward 2. The first ward is the place at the end of the bush so you can have longer vision of the river. The second ward spot is most common for control wards. If you are hard pushing the lane, those 3 ward spots are also pretty good. But that's only when you are pushing and the enemy jungler is at the bot side, because if you go into the enemy jungle and the enemy jungler is there, you're just gonna get into a 1v2 fight and die, so be careful. Here are the spots: Ward 3, Ward 4 and Ward 5. You need to place the ward on the third spot at the tip of the right side of the bush, so you can have the vision on the golems. On the fourth ward spot, you need to place the ward at the end, so that you can have the vision of the red buff. The fifth ward spot is really deep in the enemy jungle, and it is the most common place for control wards. It's really useful because it reveals a lot of the enemy topside jungle and you can easily track the enemy jungler when they enter it. So let's have a look at the matchups now. On the top lane, you mostly play full tanks and bruisers. For solo queue, of course, bruisers are a better option since you have a better carry potential with them, but tanks are really good for competitive games. The meta champions on the top at the moment are Jax, Irelia, Camille, Sion, Clad, Garen and Cannon, the only mage who is meta on the top lane at the moment. And these are the meta OTP champions on the top lane. Basically, you need a lot of practice to master them: Tryndamere, Yasuo, Gangplank, Riven and Jace. The counter picks are also a really important part because you basically dominate the lane by it. For example, the enemy already picked Tryndamere, let's say, and you pick Cannon. Basically, during the entire laning phase, Tryndamere cannot do anything to you, because you are range and have so much crowd control. Right from the champion picks, his lane is over and he cannot even outscale you in late game. That's a good example of a counter pick. Sometimes you need to pick a champion your team needs to have. For example, you have like 3 damage dealers and 1 squishy support, and picking a bruiser on the top is pretty much useless, because in teamfights there is no one who can tank the damage, and basically all of you are squishes. So let's mention the runes as well. The viable keystones on top are mostly Conqueror, Grasp of the Undying and Press the Attack, on some champions like Camille or Renekton. So you mostly use Conqueror against the tanks because of the true damage, and of course you trade them when you stack up your Conqueror. You use Grasp of the Undying on tanks mostly because it heals you and gives you a lot of tankiness. Press the Attack is good on champions who Conqueror doesn't fit. For example, Camille doesn't need Conqueror because she already has true damage from her Q. Second Wind is also a really good rune against ranged champions, keep that in mind. So let's see what's better, Teleport or Ignite. In my personal opinion, Ignite on bruisers is mostly better, because of the Teleport nerf. The cooldown has been increased by 60 seconds, and you basically stomp your lane. But on tanks and teamfight champions, Teleport is really necessary to, well, teleport in fights and the rotation's potential. The Teleport just gives you a huge pressure. So it's time to discuss the laning phase now. We're gonna talk about the most common tips and tricks on the laning phase. The most important thing is trading, of course. So how do you trade successfully? Well, in order to do that, you need to know what your champion does and what the enemy champion can do. You can either short trade your opponent or long trade. In that case, you need to know if they can out-trade you or not. When the lane starts at level 1, you can simply harass your enemy when they go for CS. And for example, you are playing as Jax or Tryndamere. You simply just attack your laner when they go for a creep without getting so much damage from the enemy minions, of course, and by this strategy you make them low HP, so it means that you can rush level 2 before them and get an easy first blood. Also, a good trading tip is the cooldown advantage. For example, you know that the enemy laner used an ability on creeps or somewhere else, and you know that it's on cooldown, so you basically have an ability advantage against them, and that means that you can easily out-trade them. So now, let's talk about the wave management. A really good tip here is the level 2 power spike. You need 7 minions to get level 2, so basically the strategy works by rushing level 2 before the enemy laner and going all in on them. The most common wave scenarios are freezing, slow pushing and fast pushing. So first of all, let's see what a freeze is. The freeze depends on the number of the enemy caster minions the wave has basically. You mostly use it when you're ahead and you can deny your enemy laner creeps. It's also really good when you are being pressured by the enemy jungler. Now, slow pushing and fast pushing. They're really good when you want to do an objective, back or roam to help your teammates. To set up a slow push, you need to simply kill the caster minions and let the lane slow push itself. By this, you can build a huge wave on the top, which the enemy laner is forced to clear, and while they are doing it, you can make a play on the map. The fast push is being created by killing the melee minions, but it's kind of self-explanatory. Fast, so it means you have less time to make a play on the map, or you're gonna lose more creeps on top when you come back. Okay, now let's talk about the most common strategy while being a top laner. Split pushing. Split pushing is basically constantly pushing a side lane, either top or bot, depending on the situation. You're wondering when to push bot and when top. Well, basically, if there is a Drake bot and Baron is not up, for example, you need to split push the top lane. So you give your team some pressure and some time to do Drake. For example, you're ahead and you can easily 1v1 the enemy laner, so it goes like this. You're gonna kill your lane and push the tower on the top, or the enemy jungler will come and you'll be 1v2 on the top. So your team will be 4v3 in the Drake fight and will probably get the Drake and some kills. The same scenario goes for the bot lane if your team is going to do the Herald or Baron. But you've got to keep something in mind. For example, there is a Baron fight going to happen, but you know that the laner you are split pushing against doesn't have teleport. So you can simply just push the wave to their tower and group with your team to take Baron. The fight is going to be 5v4 and you'll have a huge advantage. It's time for teamfighting now. So teamfighting with the bruiser and the tank is really different. Let's first talk about teamfighting with the bruiser like Camille, Jax, Renekton and so on. Your main goal in the fight is destroying their backline. You need to abuse every single window you have in order to engage the enemy backline. Most of the bruisers have crowd control, so when you engage the backline and land your crowd control, you are most likely going to execute your target. Let's say you are playing Camille and you have a really good chance to go in. If you land your stun on a squishy target, you basically execute them if you perform a full combo on them. That way the teamfight is 5v4 and your team have a great advantage. Teamfighting with a tank, however, is different, because you don't have as much damage as the bruisers got. You are mostly teamfighting for tanking the damage. For example, you are playing Ornn, but you don't have that high damage. But you know that you got 3 air knocks and a slow, and you are really tanky, so your goal in this fight is just tanking the damage from the enemy team and letting your crowd control. Of course, if you see a good opportunity to hard crowd control the backline, you go for it, and your team can follow up the hard engage, and you basically have won the fight for your team. Okay, let's have a look at roaming successfully. By roaming, you help your teammates win their lanes. Some champions can roam easily, others are really hard to roam with. For example, Jax or Camille. Both have high range and engage abilities like Jax's Q or Camille's E. By roaming successfully, you need to first push the wave until it crashes into the enemy tower, so that you don't lose a lot of CS because of this roam. Because, well, if you roam without pushing, you risk losing your own lane. If you want to roam to the mid, you push the wave and just simply gank it, or even dive him if you're aware where the enemy jungler is. If you want to gank bot, however, it's really hard to do from the top lane, because you lose so much time. And they will see you from the mid probably, so the best way is to just recall after pushing and ganking through the lane. So that's it for now, and we hope this advice will be helpful in your games, and you're gonna become a decent top laner. As always guys, thank you so much for watching, and good luck in your solo queue.